I'm speaking today to try to find out what happened to the deficit in the building trades program at Central. So the deficit was about $500,000, $500,000 was sitting in that student activity fund as a negative balance for about 10 years. It's my understanding that recently that deficit has been removed through some sort of transfer. I've been asking for the details for about 3 weeks now, and I was wondering if somebody at the table might be able to shed some light on how that happened.
One of the correspondents, Mr. Rippiud, said, I received that at the last board meeting. That was not one of your emails?
3 weeks ago, I asked for the detail. It was never provided. And then I found it myself in the board packet on page 198 of 442.
Okay.
I came across it. I asked Mr. Lanyard again the questions I had. He once again said that somebody would respond to me, and today, as of today, I have not received that answer.
So you need questions regarding the details?
Well, I guess my question is why it was decided to take student activity funds to correct a decades-old problem in building trades account. It doesn't make any sense to me.
There were a number of accounts that were used to balance that out, and that's something we'll continue to work with our auditor as we work through this process to make sure that it was done appropriately.
Very good, thank you.
To the kids' money.
Right. Moving on. Everyone should have received the July 19th, 2016 meeting minutes. Looking for the approval, motion to approve the meeting minutes as presented. Does anybody has any changes? Motion by Catherine.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Building, Director of Building and Grounds report, that is not going to take place. We will try and get you that upon his return from his vacation, his scheduled vacation here. I apologize for not being on the agenda. We're going to move right on to budget and financial matters, and a presentation by Dave Meyer from Wormer, Rogers, Doran, Ruzon, LLC.
And they will be our annual auditor this year.
Welcome.
Hi there. Thanks for having me out. Again, my name is Dave Meyer, and I'm a partner with the firm of Wormer, Rogers, Duran, and Ruzon. We're in Joliet, and I'd like to just give you a little bit of a background about myself. I have been in the, I'm a CPA, and I've been one for 24 years. My focus is in governmental accounting. I work on audits. I've done hundreds of school district audits throughout my career, and including some of the largest districts in Illinois, Elgin, U46, Plainfield, Valley View, Carpentersville, so some of the top school districts in the state. Our firm presently does 10 school district audits, so we stay up to date with all the rules, all of the governmental accounting standards that need to get followed, and just to kind of describe some of the audit procedures that we perform. We do not look at every transaction. I'm going to say that right up front. We cannot look at every single transaction. It would be cost prohibitive for us to do that. But we do look at things on a risk-based basis. We verify that you make your debt payments. We look at all your cash and investment balances and make sure that those are supported by bank statements, and we confirm those balances with the banks. We do a lot of testing on grants to make sure you're in compliance with all your grant agreements. We look at payroll. We test a lot of employees to make sure they're making what they're supposed to be making. And we ensure that you're making your benefit payments, make sure those are going where they're supposed to go. We look at property tax revenues, make sure they got allocated correctly to all of the funds. We look at grant revenues, make sure those are properly recorded. And then as far as all the other expenditures go, we test we'll test millions of dollars in expenses, make sure that there's supporting documentation for those expenditures. And then we also assist in helping you prepare your financial statements and make sure all the disclosures are complete and accurate. We'll also issue a report about your federal grants. That's called a single audit report. And then along with that, we'll issue some other required communication letters. And we'll issue also a management letter if we determine that there's anything to report to the board related to operations, if there's any areas that we perceive there could be improvements to be made. So again, it's a financial statement audit, and we are hired by the Board of Education, and we will report to the Board of Education. We are independent auditors. Yes, have I worked with some people in this room before and various other audits? I have. I know Kathy Pleasant. We used to audit the Will County years ago, and Mr. Pagliaro, we audited some of his when he was at District 204, Joliet High School, so they're familiar with me. And Anne Marie Mampy, I used to work with her as well years ago, and I know she's on the board as well. So I just wanted to let you know about that, and then also there's we put a proposal together to do an internal control review, and that, I know we're going to still pursue that, but that'll be later on after this financial statement audit takes place. We're going to be able to revisit our price on that after we kind of get a flavor for what's going on in the district, and that'll be something that we can talk about after the financial statement audit is complete for the year ended June 30th, 2016. I believe those are the comments I wanted to express.
I think it would help the room if you maybe commented on management responsibilities versus auditor responsibilities, and how that all works.
Well, certainly when it comes to management responsibilities, management of the district is going to need to supply us with something to audit. And so we're hoping to receive amounts that have been posted to the general ledger of the district, and they'll also have to provide us with assurances that those numbers are accurate. We're going to they're going to provide us with everything we need to do the audit. So we're not creating records; we are auditing records.
I was just thinking in terms of the audit letter, the financial statements are the responsibility of management, not the auditors.
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. I know with the past auditor, I think there was some confusion, at least in the community, with what the auditor really does. I mean, as you said, you're not creating these records. You're not auditing 100% of records. So maybe you could comment on what your responsibility is in regards to fraud and identifying fraud and mismanagement, that type of thing. How will that come out in the reports, or is that even part of the audit?
Well, yes, it is. We are auditing standards require us to develop our audit procedures to determine if we can detect any fraud. If we do, we would go to the proper level of management to review what we might have found. I don't know what might be out there, so I won't know until we're here.
But it's not an objective of the audit, really. If you stumble upon fraud during your audit, you have to report it. Most fraud is not caught during an audit, correct? Is that a fair statement?
Well, I wouldn't know about most. Certainly, in all of our audits that I've been on, we have found fraud. We have found instances of fraud, and those instances went to the proper level of management and even to a legal level. So that it's not out of the question. But yes, we're supposed to design our audit procedures to determine if there is material fraud. but not abuse.
You're not looking for fraud, though.
No, we're not, we're looking at everything with a skeptical eye,
Professional skepticism.
yes, but, and if we do find fraud, we would take it to the next
And I
level.
think, Norm, correct me if I'm wrong, where you're trying to go with this is if, as in the course of your audit, if you find something that is amiss, you know, whether it be fraud or accounting mistakes or things along, those are the things that you're not there to fix them and cover them up. You are there to, your responsibility is to put those into your reports and report that up the chain so that it comes back to us as Board of Education, correct?
Yes, we're not there to fix that.
Correct.
I'm just trying to point out that there
Is
are...
that what you were going for, Norm?
Well, yeah, yes, and for non-accountants in the room, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to point out that there are limitations to an audit, you know. My experience with a lot of people that are not in the field is they think, oh, this was audited, everything is perfect, it's good. And that's just not the case. And I just want to make sure it's clear that everybody understands that. And that is also why it's so important that we do these other audits, internal controls audits. With the internal control audit, doing the annual audit, the test engagement, can you do, would the internal controls audit be considered more of a consulting engagement? Can you consult and give an opinion for the same client?
Yes, we can. It's, and actually, it wouldn't be giving an opinion on this internal controls. It would be performing procedures that you, as a board, agreed to. And so it wouldn't be, we wouldn't say we have audited at that point, where we're going to say we have audited on the financial statement audit.
Okay.
And I think it's, just to refresh everybody's memory, the reason why we're pushing those internal controls beyond this is because of our switch over to Skyward system and some of the changes that we're making this year, that we're trying to put those controls to make them apply to our systems as they will be going forward, because there are so many changes that have taken place between these 2 fiscal years.
Dave, apart from the separate internal control audit, when your firm performs the financial statement audit, there is a review of internal controls as you go along, correct?
Yes.
What's covered on that review?
We will look at transaction classes, if you will, the revenues, how do you record revenues, payroll, how do you process payroll, expenditures, how do you process your accounts payable, financial statement closing, what do you do when you close the books, what sort of procedures are you following, and other areas as well, cash, how do you reconcile your bank accounts, just in the area of grants, federal grants, what controls are you using while you're processing your grant revenues and expenditures. We'll look at the journal entries throughout the year and make sure those were entered properly, reviewed by someone, procedures along those lines.
Is there testing of the controls or just mere documentation of their existence?
Yes, there is testing of controls.
Okay. You also mentioned risk-based approach. I don't know what you've been given from our district so far, but I know there's the AUP that Crow did and a lot of negative press. What is your initial assessment of our risk, and is there more testing that will be done due to our likely higher risk?
Yes, it would seem that the AUP report, I've looked at that, and I understand what the balances are and the adjustments that are being proposed, and that'll be something that we look at during our audit procedures, is to verify the conclusions that Crow came to. And then also, we will, federal grants is always a high-risk area. And then also, just as I mentioned earlier about the journal entries, that's how this AUP report basically came to be, from my understanding, was that journal entries were created that probably should not have been recorded. And so we would certainly, on all our audits, we do look at those things.
So from a risk-based perspective, would you be reviewing all interfund transfers or journal entries?
We always do on all school district audits.
Dave, one
Yes.
last thing. On the internal controls we just previously discussed, if you do find something that isn't being done by best practices, that is something that you also report on in your audit report, right? Weaknesses in internal control, whether they be material to material or whatever, right? That's a report, part of your audit that you're going to be doing separate from the internal control review down the line.
Yes. Yes, we are required by auditing standards that if we run across what we determine to be a significant deficiency, that must be reported in writing. If we determine that there is a material weakness, which would be a step above a significant deficiency, that also would be reported in writing to the Board of Education. And that would come in the form of findings in the single audit report.
But wouldn't that just be findings related to the federal money?
No, it would include both findings related to federal money and then also financial statement findings.
Not related to the federal money?
They could be or could not be, yes. But whether it's financial statement findings is one segment, and that could relate also to federal, and then federal grant findings is a separate category that we would have to report under.
Okay. There is another letter, I think in SAS 114, communication to management.
Yes.
What would be reported in there that wouldn't be reported in your in the financial statements?
That is a letter of communication that lays out responsibilities, and we actually issue two. We'll issue one at the beginning of the audit and then one at the end of the audit. And just sort of lays out some of the groundwork so that it's in writing what your responsibilities were, what ours were. And it covers a lot of the same items that are in the audit engagement letter. And so, but it's again, a required communication that auditing standards, as mentioned, Statement on Auditing Standards 114 requires those communications be written.
But is there, I mean, the letter at the end of the audit, there is communication of, I know there's a list of things, staff was helpful or not helpful, various things. So that's would a more minor level finding than would be reported in the A133 audit reports, or?
Okay, but I'll kind of run over what the deliverables you would expect for us to bring to you at the end. And one would be the financial statements themselves. Okay, and then another would be the report that has the same numbers in that financial statements, but that goes to the State Board of Education, a required filing that must be in their format. But we will give you copies of that as well. So that's two. The third one will be the single audit report. That would be reporting on federal grants, our testing of those grants. If there's any findings on federal grants that are any finding at all, it'll be reported in that single audit. In addition, inside the single audit, if there are any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that relate to financial statement reporting, those will be in there as well. So that's in the single audit. Then we'll have two SAS 114 letters, as we call them. Those are required communications to the Board of Education. One will be like a pre-audit communication. The next one will be a post-audit communication. And in that post-audit communication, we're also going to provide any entries that we determined had to be necessary to report your financial statements correctly. And typically those would include entries to record capital assets that were purchased during the year, or entries that made changes to your long-term debt during the year. Maybe a reclassification from one fund to another. It just depends on what we find. Being that you're on the cash basis, there shouldn't be very many journal entries, but there typically are some. So those will be in that second communications letter as well. And then we'll also have another letter, what we'll call a management letter, and those will have suggestions for improvement to deficiencies that we may have found, but those deficiencies we did not determine to be significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. So that would be the management letter.
And there's also
The
management
management
letter
rep
letter
we-
from,
that we sign
Yeah.
to the auditors.
So the management representation letter is a communication from you back to us, basically saying, we've disclosed everything to you that you needed to do our audit.
yes, and we know of no instances of fraud, we know
Correct.
we have complied with all laws and regulations.
It's also a requirement of auditing standards that they must have conversations with management regarding fraud. So those are held as well during the audit process.
Just one last question regarding the findings. So findings are reported in the A133 audit. The A133 audit is a compliance audit. So there's really no materiality for the findings that deal with federal funds. There are also findings reported on the financial statements in that section of the A133. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there is materiality considered in the financial statement audit, correct?
Well, there's materiality considered also in the federal awards as well.
The federal, the A133 is a compliance audit, though.
It is.
So you could have a $0 finding. There doesn't have to be a dollar value associated with it. It could just be simply that you didn't file something by a correct date.
That's correct.
Okay. For the financial statement findings, there is a materiality. So you could technically have a couple findings, and correct me if I'm wrong, a couple findings that net together to, you could have 100,000 one way, 50,000 the other way. You have a net finding of $50,000, which may or may not be considered material. Is that correct for the financial statements?
Well, I wouldn't look at it that way, honestly. That would more or less, if we're looking at errors in reporting, there's probably, to be a deficiency or a finding, if you will, it's probably either you don't have a procedure in place or you have a procedure and you're not following it. And so those would be the kinds of things that would